Alright. I'm Lauren Boyer on the Not So Quiet period, discussing another stirring topic in college athletics, the discrimination of gays and lesbians. Here with me today to discuss this topic is Nevin Capel. She is the co-founder of the website freedomsounds.org and strong supporter of her campaign, Break the Silence. Nevin, thanks for joining us here. So, well, to start out, why don't you just tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, and your involvement in college athletics?
Okay. Well, I was a student athlete at Fairleigh Dickinson University. I played women's basketball. And I also decided to come out while I was in college. And for the most part, I received a lot of support from my team and the administration. But there was still a lot of subtle forms of homophobia. You would hear the rumors of people saying, "Oh, she's gay," or guys finding out and being like, "Oh, well, I didn't know that," this and that. And most of them were very accepting and were able to embrace that side of me. But there were some issues that needed to be addressed.
Okay.
So after I graduated, I decided that it was time to just kind of break free of the college sports realm. I was thinking about coaching, but then not sure because I knew I couldn't be openly gay if I was a coach. So I went into corporate America for about 7 years. I worked for a pharmaceutical company, and then one of my big, I guess, promises to my community was that I would go back to really kind of serve them and really help some of the high school students. So I founded Love Athlete, which identifies underserved high school girls and connects them with college coaches. We focus primarily on women's basketball.
Okay.
And while I was while I was working with Love Athlete, I was working very closely with a lot of college coaches.
Okay.
And the same sort of issues regarding sexuality started to come up. Coaches telling me stories behind the scenes about athletic department issues. They can't put their partners' names in media guides. If a hiring AD from another school finds out that they may be gay or thought of as gay, they do face some challenges there when it comes to discrimination during the hiring process. So I was hearing a lot of these stories and kind of made a decision to not only hear them but kind of tell them. So although I'm not telling them personally, I invite anybody who wants to get their story out to be a part of the Break the Silence campaign. And that's part of the reason I named it Break the Silence, because I was hearing a lot of these stories behind the scenes, and I wanted to bring them to the forefront so that the community can kind of seek support from one another.
That's great. It seems that on your website too. I've really been checking it out since we first spoke, and it seems like you're really doing that too, which is really neat. Now I also noticed your mission for your website, which every website, every campaign has a mission, and you really talk about advancing the progression of an inclusive culture for individuals in the intercollegiate athletics community, regardless of their sexual orientation. So you want to, you're kind of saying, I want to talk about to all athletes, whether gay, lesbian, and then you also talking about using that voice to empower the student athletes. Can you just talk about that? Like, what inspired you? You talked about it a little bit, but what inspired you the most to create that? Was it your experience, or was it so much just hearing these other athletes that you've come across?
I think it was a little bit of both. I had my experience when I was a student athlete, and I dealt with some isolated issues then. But once I broke free, I kind of let go of a lot of that, and then re-entered the community. And a lot of the coaches, as we would cross paths, as we would get to know each other better, would tell me some of these stories. And so that was my main motivation, I think, was, the student athletes of today's generation are a little bit more progressive and inclusive, but I still think you're dealing with that barrier with the coaches and the administrators that are kind of in those leadership roles to really influence change a little faster, and just don't know how.
Okay.
So that was part of the reason I wanted to break the silence, just to kind of give them a way to begin making that change.
And kind of to piggyback on that too, while I was researching a lot about this and just trying to find more case studies and and just to hear more about it. Actually, I don't know if this surprises you or not, but a lot of the case studies that I read and saw were mostly male athlete discriminating against other male athletes. Now, they were in the football and which you hear about more, but does this surprise you that I read more about those kind of case studies? And also, to kind of go along with that, is there a misconception with this type of discrimination? For example, it only happens with one gender, it only happens with athletes. What type of misconceptions are there with that?
Well, it's interesting when you research, you find a lot of male, on male discrimination, and I think there's a lot in existence. But as far as there not being any female discrimination, I think there is a lot, but it's a much more subtle form of discrimination. I think with a lot of guys, what you see, especially like football and basketball and the more aggressive sports is that aggression, so the forms of discrimination seem to be a bit more obvious and deliberate. You'll hear the homophobic slurs, or you'll find cliques that kind of like shun people and make them feel isolated, whereas on the girl side, a lot of the subtle discrimination comes from just the chit chat and the whispers and the rumors, or on the coaching end, you'll find that coaches are, once they have that label of being gay, then they might shun away from hiring that coach, or their inability to put their name in the media guide. Those kinds of discrimination are existing, so it's a little bit more subtle. And I think that might be the misconception, is that because women aren't necessarily as vocal or deliberate with their slurs, it seems to be not as prevalent.
Right.
But I feel as though it's the whole realm. And for instance, you look at, there's approximately 350 Division I women's basketball programs, and you only have 2 coaches who are out lesbians. So there's a lot of work that needs to be done.
Definitely. So lastly, again, going back to your website, which www.freedomsounds.org, it states kind of what you hope comes from this, and we've gotten into that a lot, or what you hope to see, but what do you think the future holds for this type of discrimination in college athletics, in the community, with coaches, with administrators, with students? Like, from all these panels that you're going to, what do you think will happen with all this?
Well, it's interesting because a lot of times when you see change, you see it going from the top down. So, starting at the president and then the administrative level, down to the coaches and the student athletes. But I think a lot of the noise from homophobia in sports has been generated from the student athletes. And, student athletes who've been willing to take a stand and say, this isn't right, this needs to change. So I'm hoping that change will happen soon, and that not only the student athletes will speak up, but we'll find that more coaches and administrators are willing to speak up and are less tolerant of discrimination. So I think those are the biggest issues. Lastly, I feel like when coaches or student athletes are subjected to discrimination, the institution needs to look at it as not just a personal attack on the individual, but an attack on the institution. So really kind of claim responsibility and accountability, and also figure out how they're going to make that change and how they're going to support this student athlete or this coach that is within their community and just been subjected to discrimination.
That's a really good point. It's not, like you said, it's not just about that single athlete who's going through this. It's so much more than that. It's the community, it's the people around them, and that involves the university. They try and make you feel like your family there, especially with, you saw that with your athletic experience.
Right.
They try to make it into a family, and so when one person has to go through that, they all, so that's a really good point. But that's all I have for you. And do you have any other comments or anything you want to add?
I appreciate what you're doing, and I hope that people are able to visit your blog and actually see some of the issues that are taking place.
I hope so too. I'm doing my best to get it out there, and hopefully we'll get a lot of comments and people, sharing, maybe just with my website, sharing some of their stories. But thank you so much for your time. You really, just opened my eyes on even past the research that I've done, and research only takes you so far. But so I really thank you. And tune in a couple days for what the next trending topic is on the Not So Quiet period. And make sure you check out Nevin's campaign, really awesome campaign at www.freedomsounds.org.